She was getting hit. Hard. Night after night. Game after game. Hip checks that would make hockey players wince. Forearms to the chest that never got called. Elbows that found her ribs like they had a GPS tracker. And the league? Silent. The referees? Looking the other way. The WNBA front office? Radio silence. Caitlin Clark was out there taking punishment that would break most athletes mentally. She was absorbing contact that crossed the line from competitive to dangerous. And nobody, not a single person with power, stepped in to say a word. But then something happened. Something that nobody predicted. Something that changed everything. The loudest voices in basketball, the untouchable legends of the NBA, broke their silence. And what they said, it didn't just ripple through the sports world. It exploded. Steph Curry spoke first. Then LeBron James. Then Luka Dončić. Then Trae Young. Then Paul George. Then Pascal Siakam. One after another after another. Champions. MVPs, global icons. All of them pointed at the same person. All of them said the same thing. Caitlin Clark is different. But here's where it gets complicated. Here's where the tension thickens like smoke before wildfire. Not everyone agreed. Not every NBA superstar jumped on board. Some stepped sideways. Some dodged the question entirely. Some made choices that felt pointed, intentional, strategic. And Caitlin, for the first time in her young career, she was left speechless. Not because of criticism, not because of doubt, but because players she grew up watching, players she idolized from her Iowa bedroom, were now standing in her corner like a personal army. Let me be absolutely clear about what you're about to witness. This isn't a highlight reel. This isn't a puff piece designed to make you feel good. This is a raw, unfiltered breakdown of a moment that rewired women's basketball forever. A moment that exposed cracks in the system. A moment that revealed who's really paying attention and who's pretending not to see. You're going to hear what Steph Curry actually said, word for word. You're going to understand why his comparison wasn't flattery. It was recognition at a level that changes careers. You're going to learn why Pascal Siakam put Clark above his own all-star teammate when asked about player popularity. Above Tyrese Halliburton. Above everyone. You're going to see Paul George explain, in the most honest way possible, why some WNBA players feel threatened. Why jealousy is creeping into locker rooms. Why this moment is as uncomfortable as it is historic. And you're going to understand why Jason Tatum and Kevin Durant made different choices. Why their answers or lack thereof tell a story all by themselves. Here's what the mainstream won't tell you. The physical play against Clark wasn't random. It wasn't accidental. It was a message. Welcome to the league. Know your place. We were here first. That message was sent through hard fouls, through shoulder bumps that knocked her off balance, through contact that went uncalled while the world watched. But the response from the NBA's biggest names? That was a different message entirely. We see you, we respect you, and we're not staying quiet anymore. When Stephen Curry calls you his basketball twin, when he breaks down your release time and says it matches his own, that's not casual praise. That's a coronation. When Luka Dončić is asked to name his favorite women's basketball player and says your name without hesitating, without hedging, without mentioning anyone else first, that's not a throwaway quote. That's validation from someone who redefined expectations himself. This isn't about hype. This isn't about marketing. This isn't about social media engagement or viral moments. This is about a 23-year-old woman who walked into a league that wasn't ready for her, took every hit they threw, and kept scoring anyway. And finally, the people at the top of basketball's mountain decided they'd seen enough. What happens next is where it gets really interesting, because not everyone was cheering, not everyone was celebrating, and the tension that's been building, it's about to reach a breaking point that forces the entire WNBA to make a choice. Let's talk about what silence really means. When a league stays quiet, it's never neutral. Silence is a statement. Silence is permission. Silence tells everyone watching exactly where the priorities are. For weeks, Caitlin Clark absorbed punishment that would have triggered investigations in other leagues. The contact was constant. The fouls were flagrant. The message was brutally clear. You might be famous. You might have fans. But on this court, you're going to earn every single inch. And the WNBA, they let it happen. No press releases. No warnings to opposing teams. No public statements about protecting their most marketable player. Just business as usual while the hits kept coming. Fans noticed immediately. Social media erupted. Comment sections filled with outrage. People who had never watched a single WNBA game suddenly had strong opinions about officiating consistency. But inside the league, the silence held until the NBA broke it. Here's what you need to understand about why that matters. NBA players almost never cross league lines publicly. They have their own battles to fight, their own seasons to navigate, their own controversies to manage. Stepping into WNBA territory isn't just unusual, it's practically unheard of. When Stephen Curry speaks about shooting, the entire basketball world stops to listen. This is a man who fundamentally changed how the game is played. He didn't just master three-point shooting, he weaponized it. He made teams afraid of zones they never worried about before. So when Curry looked at Caitlin Clark and saw himself, that wasn't hyperbole. That was professional recognition at the highest possible level. He didn't just praise her range. He got specific, technical, analytical. He talked about release time. He said someone broke down the numbers, and Clark's release speed matches his own. Think about that for a second. The greatest shooter in basketball history, statistically undeniably, is saying a 23-year-old rookie has his mechanics. Then he went further. He called her a performer. He praised her confidence. He pointed out her floor game as equally impressive as her shooting. He used the words total package. Stephen Curry doesn't hand out compliments like participation trophies. Every word, he says, gets analyzed, clipped, shared, and debated. He knows this. He chooses his words carefully. And he chose to elevate Caitlin Clark to legacy-level status in a single interview. But here's where the story twists. Because not every NBA star followed Curry's lead. Not everyone was ready to anoint Clark as the future of women's basketball. Jason Tatum, NBA champion, Olympic gold medalist, one of the most respected young players in the league, was asked directly about his favorite WNBA player. His answer? A.J. Wilson. Full stop. No elaboration. No mention of Clark at all. Now look, A.J. Wilson is phenomenal. She's dominant. She deserves recognition. Nobody is questioning her talent. But with Clark rewriting record books every single week, with her face on every sports network in America, with her jersey sales outpacing most NBA players, that choice felt intentional. It felt like a statement. Kevin Durant did the same thing when asked the identical question. Who's your favorite women's basketball player? Angel Reese. Again, talented player, legitimate star. But in a moment when Clark was dominating every conversation, Durant pointed somewhere else. These weren't accidents. These weren't oversights. These were calculated redirections from two of basketball's biggest names. Why? Paul George answered that question before anyone even asked it. In one of the most honest breakdowns of this entire situation, George laid out the emotional reality of what's happening inside the WNBA. He talked about grinding, about players who spent years building this league from scratch, women who played in front of empty gyms, who traveled on commercial flights while their male counterparts flew private, who fought for every dollar of every contract. Then a rookie walks in and becomes the face of everything overnight. George didn't dismiss Clark's talent. He gave her full credit. But he also acknowledged the other side. Some players are going to feel offended. Some are going to feel overlooked. Some are going to feel like everything they built is being handed to someone who just arrived. That tension, that resentment, it's human, it's real, and it explains everything. The hard fouls, The cold shoulders, the pointed answers. The WNBA isn't just playing basketball right now. It's fighting over who gets to define its future. Pascal Siakam said something that should have made national headlines. It didn't. Not really. A few clips circulated. A few fans shared it. But the weight of what he actually said, that got buried under the noise. He was asked a simple question during a live television interview. Which players get the most love right now? Which athletes are capturing fan attention at the highest level? Siakam could have said anyone. He's surrounded by all-stars. He plays alongside Tyrese Halliburton, one of the NBA's brightest young point guards, a player who just earned his second All-Star selection. But when the question landed, Siakam went somewhere unexpected. He went straight to Caitlin Clark, not as an afterthought, not as a polite mention. He put her at the very top of the list. His exact words? She's another level in terms of the love that she has. Another level. He called her a beast. He said the support around her is impossible to ignore. And then he did something remarkable. He stacked her above his own teammate. Think about locker room dynamics for a second. Think about the unwritten rules of professional sports. You don't publicly say someone outside your organization is more beloved than the guy sharing the court with you every night, unless it's undeniably true, unless the evidence is so overwhelming that denying it would look ridiculous. Siakam made a choice. He looked at the landscape of basketball, NBA and WNBA combined, and pointed at a 23-year-old woman in Indiana as the center of gravity. That's not sympathy. That's not hype. That's recognition earned through performance. And he wasn't alone. Obi Toppin added his voice without chasing headlines. This is a player known for action, not words. He lets his dunk speak. He doesn't manufacture moments for cameras. So when Toppin talked about Clark, it felt genuine, unrehearsed, real. He called watching her play a joy. He said seeing her courtside at NBA games brings visible excitement. He emphasized that the appreciation goes both ways. She watches them, they watch her. This mutual respect between leagues, it barely existed before Clark arrived. The WNBA and NBA occupied separate spaces, separate conversations, separate fan bases that occasionally overlapped but rarely merged. Clark collapsed that distance in less than one season. Now here comes Trae Young with something even more interesting. Young isn't just any NBA player. He's one of the most polarizing figures in basketball. He's been booed in arenas. He's thrived under hostile conditions. He shoots from logos and smiles while doing it. Sound familiar? When asked about a potential three-point contest with Clark, Young didn't hesitate. Of course I would. Then he dropped a stat that most people probably missed. He and Caitlin Clark are the only two players in history to lead all of college basketball in points and assists in the same season. The only two, ever. That's not trivia. That's a connection that goes beyond skill comparison. It's historical company, elite company that excludes literally everyone else who has ever played college basketball. Young sees himself in Clark. The range, the confidence, the willingness to take shots that would terrify lesser players, the ability to create for others while still dominating the score sheet. He joked that he'd need to practice more than he has for previous three-point competitions. Then he got serious. Nah, I'd be ready for sure. I'd do it. This wasn't throwaway banner. This was Young acknowledging Clark as a peer, not a curiosity, not a novelty, a legitimate competitor who could push him. Picture that event for a moment. Caitlin Clark versus Trae Young. Three-point shootout. All-Star weekend. The arena would shake. The ratings would shatter records. The moment would become instant legend. And Young knows it. That's why he said yes without blinking. But all of this leads to an uncomfortable question. If NBA stars are lining up to praise Clark, to challenge her, to compare her to themselves, why are some WNBA players treating her like a threat? Why is the contact so physical? Why is the hostility so visible? Why does her own league seem split on whether to celebrate her or contain her? The answer lies in something Paul George understood before almost anyone else. Rapid elevation creates discomfort. Always. When someone rises as fast, they don't just occupy space. They displace people who are already there. Luka Dončić doesn't overthink his answers. He's one of the most honest players in professional basketball. When he's frustrated, you see it. When he's impressed, he says it. There's no PR filter running between his brain and his mouth. So when a reporter asked him about his favorite women's basketball player, his answer landed with weight precisely because it was so simple. Caitlin Clark. No qualifiers. No diplomatic hedging. No mention of other players to keep things balanced. Just her name, delivered without hesitation. The reporter seemed almost surprised. Really, Luka doubled down. Yeah. Then he added something that stirred controversy before the clip even finished spreading. He mentioned Paige Bueckers, said she's okay, but noted he hadn't seen her play in the WNBA yet. That comment, she's okay, became its own story. Some called it dismissive. Others pointed out he was simply being honest about what he's actually watched. But here's what matters more than the Bueckers mention. Luka Dončić measures greatness by impact, not potential, not college highlights, not projections. He rose from European prospect to NBA centerpiece by proving himself against the best in the world every single night. He judged Clark by the same standard, and he put her at the top without needing to see another game first. That kind of endorsement, stripped down, unfiltered, immediate, carries weight that polished statements never can. Because Luka isn't performing when he says things like this. He's just responding, which means his answer reflects exactly what he actually thinks. Caitlin Clark is his favorite. End the conversation. But the contrast around these moments creates the real story. Look at the landscape. Curry, Young, Luka, Siakam, Toppin, Paul George, all leaning in, all acknowledging what Clark is doing, all treating her as a legitimate force who has changed the conversation. Then look at the other side. Tatum going with A.J. Wilson, Durant going with Angel Reese, neither one mentioning Clark when given direct opportunities. These aren't random choices. These are deliberate statements delivered by two of basketball's most intelligent stars. Tatum is a champion. He understands media. He knows every word gets analyzed. If he wanted to praise Clark, he would have. Durant is one of the most thoughtful players in NBA history when it comes to public statements. He considers angles. He weighs implications. His choice wasn't an oversight. So what are they saying without saying it? Maybe they genuinely prefer other players. That's valid. A.J. Wilson is a monster. Angel Reese is a star. But timing matters. Context matters. When Clark is dominating every sports conversation in America, when her name is on every talk show and every debate segment, choosing to spotlight someone else feels intentional. It feels like a counterbalance. A quiet pushback against the wave of attention surrounding one player. And that's fine. Disagreement is healthy. Not everyone needs to crown the same queen. But the gap between those who lean in and those who step sideways reveals something important. Caitlin Clark is not generating neutrality. Nobody is shrugging. Nobody is indifferent. Every answer, whether it celebrates her or redirects away from her, is a response to her presence. That's power. Real power. Because when you force reactions from the biggest names in basketball, simply by existing, you've already changed the game. The WNBA hasn't seen this kind of polarization since it began. Players who built the league over decades are watching a rookie command attention they never received. Media cycles that ignored women's basketball for years now can't stop talking about it. And Clark is at the center of every single conversation. She didn't ask for this position. She didn't campaign for it. She walked into the league, started playing at an elite level, and the spotlight followed. Now everybody has to choose. Do they embrace what's happening, or do they resist it? There's no middle ground anymore. The era of quiet WNBA coverage is over. Ratings are through the roof. Arenas are selling out. Merchandise is flying off shelves faster than Nike can stock it. This is what happens when a generational talent collides with perfect timing. Stephen Curry's actual words need to land directly, not paraphrased, not summarized, not filtered through someone else's interpretation. Because what he said about Caitlin Clark wasn't casual praise or surface-level acknowledgement. It was technical, specific, the kind of breakdown that only comes from someone who has spent decades mastering the exact craft he's describing. Curry talked about watching Clark and feeling something rare, something familiar. He said someone broke down her release time, the exact speed from catch to launch, and it matches his own, nearly identical. Let that register. Stephen Curry is statistically the greatest shooter in basketball history. More three-pointers made than anyone who has ever played the game. A shooting form so perfect that coaches use his film as textbook material. And he's saying a 23-year-old rookie has the same release mechanics. But he didn't stop there. He talked about her range. The places on the floor where she's comfortable shooting from. The distances that would make most players hesitate. Clark doesn't hesitate. He talked about her confidence, the way she carries herself when the moment gets loud, the way she performs under pressure instead of shrinking from it. He called her a performer, said you can't help but watch when she plays. Then came the final piece, the one that elevated his comments from impressive to historic. Curry acknowledged that her shooting gets all the attention, the range, the deep threes, the logo shots that make highlight reels explode. But then he pointed at something else. Her floor game is as impressive. He said she's a total package. Complete, not just a shooter. A player who sees the court, creates for teammates, controls pace, and understands the game at a level that goes far beyond putting the ball through the hoop. This wasn't Curry being nice. This wasn't a promotional favor for the WNBA. This was recognition from the top of the mountain. And recognition from Curry carries consequences. His belief has shaped careers. Klay Thompson became a legend playing alongside him. Jordan Poole turned into a max contract player developing under his watch. When Curry validates someone, the basketball world pays attention. Scouts reconsider. Executives take notes. Fans who might have dismissed someone suddenly lean in. Clark already had momentum before Curry spoke. After, the trajectory shifted to something steeper, because now her name sits next to his in the same conversation, not as a comparison for comparison's sake, but as genuine acknowledgement that she's doing something special, something Curry himself recognizes because he's lived it. The league asked for attention. They asked for conversation. They asked for a player who could carry the spotlight and bring new fans through the doors. They got exactly what they asked for. And now they're watching the consequences unfold in real time. The debate has moved beyond whether Clark is good. That's settled. The question now is whether the WNBA is ready for what she represents. Because generational talents don't arrive quietly. They expose weaknesses. They accelerate change. They force systems to adapt or get left behind. The officiating issues, exposed. The travel disparities, suddenly unacceptable when a global star is waiting in airport security lines. The marketing gaps, visible now, because there's actually something worth marketing. Clark didn't create these problems. They existed for years while the league operated outside mainstream attention, but she put a spotlight on them. And once something's visible, you can't pretend it doesn't exist. Charter flights got approved mid-season, not because the league suddenly found extra money, because watching their biggest asset travel like a minor league player became impossible to justify. That's leverage. Real leverage. One player, 23 years old, and she's already rewriting how the league operates. Let's talk numbers. Real numbers. Because beyond the quotes and the opinions and the debates, the data tells a story that nobody can argue with. Television ratings for WNBA games jumped over 400% compared to last season. 400%. That's not a slight uptick. That's not gradual growth. That's an explosion. That's a complete transformation of audience size in less than one season. Games started moving into NBA arenas, the bigger venues, the iconic buildings, and they still sold out, every seat filled, every ticket claimed. Merchandise disappeared faster than anyone predicted. Nike couldn't keep Iowa gold on shelves. Jersey sales outpaced most NBA players. Not just WNBA comparisons, but actual NBA stars. When was the last time a rookie in any league generated that kind of commercial response? Sponsors rushed in. Brands that had never seriously considered WNBA partnerships suddenly wanted meetings, suddenly wanted their logos associated with the moment. And all of this traces back to one person, not a marketing campaign, not a league initiative, not a collective effort from multiple stars. One player, one name, one presence that changed everything. Caitlin Clark. This is why the conversation around her has become so heated. This is why the tension exists at all. Because she didn't just join the league. She transformed its economics overnight. Players who spent years grinding in obscurity, who fought for every endorsement dollar, every media mention, every scrap of attention, watch a rookie walk in and command everything they've been denied. Paul George called this out directly. He talked about the grind, the years of building, the work that happened when nobody was watching. And then he acknowledged reality. You have this girl that comes along from college and is an instant change. She's handed pretty much being the face of the league. He wasn't attacking Clark. He was explaining the emotional landscape. Some players will feel pride in what's happening. Some will feel pushed aside. Some will welcome the rising tide. Others will resent the boat that's rising fastest. That's human nature. That's what happens when change arrives faster than people can process. The physicality against Clark on the court, that's part of it. Those hard fouls aren't just basketball. They're statements. They're messages. They're frustrations that can't be expressed in words getting expressed through contact instead. The league stayed quiet because acknowledging the problem meant acknowledging everything underneath it. The jealousy, the resentment, the uncomfortable reality that one player is getting attention that others feel they deserved. But the silence couldn't hold forever. Not when NBA champions started speaking. Not when the biggest names in basketball pointed at the problem and said this isn't right. That pressure forced movement. Subtle at first, then more visible. Charter flights approved. Officiating scrutiny increased. Marketing budgets reallocated. The league started adapting because it had no choice. The spotlight was too bright. The audience was too large. The stakes were too high. But here's the challenge that still remains. You can't build a league on one player. Not sustainably. Not long-term. The WNBA needs Caitlin Clark right now. She's the engine driving everything forward. But she also needs protection. Real protection. Not just statements, but action. And the other players, the veterans who built this foundation, they need attention too. They need stories told. They need platforms elevated. Because if this becomes a Caitlin Clark show and nothing else, the resentment will only grow. The divisions will deepen. The physical play will escalate. Getting this balance right is the difference between launching something sustainable and creating a flashpoint that burns out. The NBA faced this with LeBron. Years of everything revolving around one player created fatigue. The WNBA has that blueprint. The question is whether they'll use it. True greatness never creates neutrality. Look back through sports history. Look at every player who fundamentally changed their game. Look at the reactions they generated. Michael Jordan wasn't just loved. He was envied. He was resented. He was targeted. Serena Williams wasn't just celebrated. She was criticized. She was doubted. She was held to standards nobody else faced. Tiger Woods wasn't just admired. He was isolated. He was scrutinized. He made rooms uncomfortable just by walking in. LeBron James? Decades of debate that still hasn't settled. Greatness divides. It forces people to choose sides. It makes neutrality impossible. Caitlin Clark is living that reality right now. She's not generating mild opinions. Every take is hot. Every reaction is strong. People either believe she's transforming the sport or believe she's getting unearned attention. There's no middle ground. And that, more than any statistic or quote, proves she's a real thing. Because if she was just good, if she was just talented, people would shrug and move on. They'd acknowledge the skill and turn back to their own concerns. But nobody's shrugging. Nobody's moving on. She's forcing conversation every single day, forcing debate, forcing people who never cared about women's basketball to suddenly have strong opinions about it. The cheers are loud. The criticism is loud. The support is passionate. The resistance is visible. That's what happens when someone arrives who can't be ignored. The WNBA asked for this. Not specifically Clark, but what she represents. They wanted attention. They wanted conversation. They wanted a player who could carry the spotlight into mainstream spaces. They got everything they asked for. Now they're learning what comes with it. The attention brings opportunity. It brings sponsors. It brings viewers. It brings revenue that wasn't there before. But it also brings heat. It brings tension. It brings uncomfortable questions about who deserves what and why. Clark didn't create these dynamics. She just accelerated them. The gaps in officiating existed before she arrived. The travel disparities existed. The marketing underinvestment existed. She made them impossible to ignore. And that's uncomfortable for a league that had learned to operate in the margins, that had adapted to lower expectations, that had built systems around scarcity rather than abundance. Abundance is harder to manage than scarcity. When there's more attention, there's more scrutiny. When there's more money, there's more to fight over. When there's more at stake, the conflicts get bigger. Clark sits at the center of all of it, not by choice, not by design, just by being exactly good enough to matter. The question moving forward isn't whether she can handle the pressure. She's already proven that. Night after night, she takes the hits and keeps producing. The question is whether the league can handle what she's brought. Can they protect their biggest star without showing favoritism? Can they market her appropriately without erasing the veterans? Can they grow fast enough to capture this moment without breaking what was built before? These aren't hypothetical challenges. They're happening right now. Every decision the WNBA makes for the next few years will be shaped by this reality. The spotlight is on. The audience is watching. The mistakes will be visible. And Clark will keep playing through all of it, because that's what generational talents do. They don't wait for conditions to be perfect. They perform anyway. The Curry comparison deserves deeper exploration. Because when Stephen Curry calls you his basketball twin, that's not just a compliment. That's a blueprint. That's a prediction about where a career might go. Curry didn't just master shooting. He changed the geometry of basketball entirely. Before him, three-point shooting was a weapon. After him, it became the foundation. Defenses had to extend further. Spacing became more valuable. Players who couldn't shoot from distance saw their market value drop. He didn't just succeed in the existing system. He forced the system to rebuild around his strengths. Clark has similar potential. Her range isn't normal. Her confidence from distance isn't normal. Her ability to make shots that shouldn't be attempts is exactly what made Curry revolutionary. But here's where the comparison gets more interesting. Curry also has elite floor vision. He creates for teammates. He makes players around him better. Clark does the same thing. She led college basketball in points and assists. That dual dominance is almost impossible. It requires being the best scorer while also being the best distributor. Only two players in college basketball history have done it, her and Trae Young. So the comparisons stack. Curry's shooting, Young's dual threat capability, Magic Johnson's court vision, Patrick Mahomes' cultural pull. That's the potential ceiling. That's what people see when they watch her play. She's not trying to be the women's version of anyone. She's becoming the first Caitlin Clark, a category that didn't exist before she created it. And that's why the NBA keeps paying attention. That's why these voices keep speaking up. They recognize something they've seen before, but also something new. The familiarity draws them in. The shooting mechanics, the confidence, the willingness to take impossible shots. But the context is different. The challenges are different. The resistance she faces is different. Clark is doing this under harsher lights than any women's basketball player before her. Social media magnifies everything. Every game is debated in real time. Every foul is analyzed. Every miss is criticized. The attention that took years to build for previous stars arrived for Clark immediately. She didn't get to grow quietly. She didn't get to develop away from scrutiny. Everything happened under maximum pressure from day one. That pressure would break most athletes. It hasn't broken her. Every time the contact gets harder, she responds with better play. Every time the criticism gets louder, she delivers moments that silence it. That resilience is what separates good from great. Talent gets you drafted. Resilience makes you legendary. Clark is both. In abundance. The NBA stars watching can see it. That's why they keep speaking. They recognize the same qualities that made them successful. And they know what's coming next. More attention, more pressure, more expectations, more resistance. And through all of it, Clark will keep playing. Keep producing. Keep proving that she belongs at the very top. The league's challenge now is balancing what's happening with what needs to happen. Elevating one rookie to cultural centerpiece status is powerful. It drives attention. It generates revenue. It creates the kind of mainstream moments that sports leagues dream about. But it's also dangerous. Because when everything revolves around one player, that player becomes both symbol and target. Clark is already facing harder contact than other players. She's already absorbing frustrations that go beyond normal competition. If the imbalance grows, if her spotlight keeps expanding while others feel overlooked, the resistance will intensify. The league has to protect her health without creating the appearance of favoritism. That's a razor-thin line. Every call that goes her way will be scrutinized. Every call that doesn't will be criticized. The WNBA needs to invest in officiating consistency across all games. Quicker reviews, clearer standards, accountability for contact that crosses into dangerous territory, not just for Clark, for everyone, because the solution can't be special treatment for one player. That would deepen divisions instead of healing them. The solution has to be better treatment for the entire league. Charter flights shouldn't just exist because Clark is on a team. They should exist because professional athletes deserve professional conditions. Marketing shouldn't just focus on the biggest name. It should tell stories about the veterans who built this foundation. Revenue sharing should reflect the rising tide, not just the tallest wave. The NBA learned these lessons through trial and error, through years of managing LeBron fatigue and super team debates. The WNBA has that blueprint available right now. They don't have to repeat the same mistakes. But learning from a blueprint requires intentional effort. It requires acknowledging that this moment is both opportunity and risk. The opportunity is obvious. More eyes, more money, more legitimacy. The risk is equally clear. Overexposure, resentment, structural strains that break instead of bend. Getting the balance right means investing in infrastructure, not just star power. It means telling multiple stories, not just one. It means treating this moment as a foundation for sustainable growth, not a peak to exploit. Clark can handle her part. She's proven that. The questions aren't about her anymore. The questions are about whether the league around her can rise to meet the moment. Can they protect their stars while developing new ones? Can they capture mainstream attention while serving core fans? Can they grow fast enough to seize opportunity without burning out in the process? These decisions are happening now, behind closed doors, in boardrooms and negotiations. The results will shape women's basketball for the next decade. Clark kicked the door open. What gets built through that doorway depends on everyone else. Every era has a trigger point, a moment a player, a collision of talent, timing, and opportunity that changes everything that follows. The WNBA just found theirs. Caitlin Clark didn't arrive asking for permission. She didn't wait for consensus or gradual acceptance. She walked in and forced a conversation through pure performance. The reactions proved the impact. Stephen Curry drew comparisons to himself. Pascal Siakam put her above his own teammate. Trae Young embraced her as a peer. Luka Dončić named her without hesitation. Paul George explained the emotional weight of what's happening. And others stepped sideways. Tatum, Durant, names that chose different answers when the question was obvious. That division, that split between celebration and resistance, tells the story better than any statistic could. Nobody is indifferent. Nobody is shrugging. The center of gravity moved. And everyone in basketball feels it. The WNBA is no longer asking for attention. It's commanding it. Ratings are up. Arenas are packed. Debates spill across every platform, every timeline, every locker room. None of this is accidental. It's the result of one player colliding with the exact right moment. That collision creates heat, and heat creates growth. But growth requires navigation. It requires choices that haven't been made yet. The league has to protect Clark without creating resentment. They have to market her appropriately without erasing the players who built this foundation. They have to capture this moment without squandering it. Those challenges are real. They're not simple. They'll test leadership in ways that haven't been tested before. But one thing is already settled. The quiet era is over. The sideline status is finished. The days of asking people to care about women's basketball are gone. People care now. They care intensely. Whether they're cheering or criticizing, they're paying attention. That attention is the fuel for everything that follows. And at the center of all of it, commanding every conversation, forcing every reaction, stands Caitlin Clark, 23 years old, 0.38-second release, logo range, elite vision, unbreakable confidence. The league asked for energy. They got a full blaze. The sport asked for a face. They got someone who redefines what that means. The moment is here. The catalyst has arrived. What happens next depends on whether everyone else can keep up. Clark won't wait. She never has. The saga isn't ending. It's just entering the chapter where everything moves faster. If you want the unfiltered angles, the behind-the-scenes shifts, the power dynamics, the stories that don't make the highlight reels, that's what we're here for. Every leak, every backstage twist, every moment they won't show you. The truth behind the WNBA headlines. Hit like, subscribe, drop a comment, share this video. Stay locked in with us, because this is just the beginning.